Yes, me too. Okay, so just to jump in, give us a little bit of background, introduce yourself, and tell us about your podcast.
So I'm Sam. I'm so excited to be here. I'm the host of the Freedom Lifestyle Podcast, which is a show I started back in 2017, very selfishly.
Mhm.
I was at a time in my life where I wanted to have the freedom lifestyle, had no idea how to achieve it, didn't have many people in my life that were living that way. And so I originally started my podcast as a way to do what we're doing right now, reach out to cool people like you who are living a lifestyle I admire, get to pick their brain. I know we don't love that line, but truly that was the motivation. And thought it would just be a 5 episode series, learn some information for my next step. And it turns out a lot of other people really resonated with this desire too. So I just kept the show going since, and I now have the freedom lifestyle myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you tell us a little quick intro or overview of what the show is now and what is the Freedom Lifestyle?
So the freedom lifestyle features, I call it relatable stories from everyday people. And the
Mhm.
reason I really position it that way is because I intentionally seek out people who are not like 100 steps ahead, people who are just like 5 steps ahead of you in terms of the life that you want to be living. These are people who grew up with similar circumstances in the sense of, they're not anything that special. They didn't have like a family that just like created all of their opportunities for them. They really just decided, okay, this traditional way of working, this 9 to 5 office life, 40-hour work week, fixed location, having a boss that tells me what to do, when to do it, it just wasn't working for them, and they figured out a way to do something different with the primary motivation of I want to live a different type of life that this style of working doesn't. And so you'll hear interviews from people who had their first baby and didn't want to go back into the office because they just wanted to be more of a hands-on mom. And so they found a flexible working environment for that. You'll meet the classic, single 20 something travel lover who wants to go to Bali and work poolside with their laptop and just collect all the passport stamps, and that's their motivation. So really, what unifies everybody is they just wanted a different way of living than society was essentially presenting them, and they figured out how to use work to provide them that lifestyle change.
Yeah, that's amazing. How do you find your guests? I mean, obviously you have such a variety.
hmm A lot of people come to me.
Mhm.
Honestly, I have a tab in my inbox in my email just called like podcast pitches. And I'm sure this happens to you as well. Like, I do have a lot of people reach out to me, especially because my show ends up sharing a lot of entrepreneurial stories. So,
Right.
entrepreneurs, they know self promotion is important, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. They know that getting their ideas out there and their name out there is key. So, I get a lot of people pitch me. But in terms of like how I find these people, like my favorite interviews are people I discover organically.
Mhm.
I'm constantly traveling the world, meeting new people, living the freedom lifestyle myself, putting myself in environments with people who are living alternatively. And so I just honestly meet people. And when I find somebody interesting that I want to learn more about, those are often my best episodes because I'm just engaged and I'm like, I barely had to prep. Like, I am just asking you the questions I want to ask you right now. And a lot of it comes just organically.
Right. It's just those natural conversations. And I think this resonates so much with my audience because it's majority creatives, artists, people that want to build something for themselves to have a lifestyle like that. And I think that's just so interesting. Can you talk about lifestyle design, creating this freedom lifestyle, and how can we let our businesses support us, in how we want to be living long term?
hmm Well, the first thing is figuring out how do you want to live long term. And something I've learned is not many people give themselves the permission to really think about that and to have a blank canvas and be like, okay, if I could have any lifestyle I want, what type of lifestyle do I want?
Right.
And go through that introspective process of thinking about what a dream day, dream week, dream year might look like. Maybe it's a period of time where you want your life to look a certain way and it's just a test, but it's not forever. Or maybe you're thinking like really long term about what your forever life looks like. But you have to start with really answering those questions. And my tagline is the freedom lifestyle looks different for everyone. And what's your free? And I truly do believe that. So the first step is really figuring out, how do you want to live? And then do an audit of how close are you to living that life every single day? What are the biggest things in your life that are preventing you from achieving that? And most often it's your job, right? It's the thing that we spend the most of our time doing. And unless you're in a flexible working environment where you're either a remote worker with a flexible schedule or some type of self-employed freelancer or business owner, and specifically business owner who has created products that can be scaled or can be outsourced or can be passive, you want to figure out if it's work that's stopping you from having that, and then that's typically going to be your first change that you need to make.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, how would you tell someone to make that first step? Like, what if they're listening and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in a job that's taking all my time. I'm not content with my life right now." What's the next step? What do you do? I know a lot of people sometimes feel trapped with that.
hmm So then the next question to ask is, okay, so then what is my path to freedom?
Mhm.
And I created a free video that I can link to you, which really helps people go through the process of deciding which of the three paths. And I've kind of alluded to them, right? So I think there's the freelancer,
Mhm.
which is someone who is kind of going out into the world as a contractor, as a service provider, who's taking the skills that they already have in their current job or learning a new skill. Totally. I'm a podcasting expert and I learned how to podcast, 5 years ago. And now people pay me hundreds of dollars an hour to consult for me, right? So you could
Mhm.
totally learn a new skill and bring that into the market. So the freelancer life is one path. I think the remote worker path is a really great path for a lot of people who don't want the volatility of how much money am I going to make this month or next month, or I don't want to chase clients, or I don't really want to promote myself, and they want to be on a team. My husband has been at a remote company for 6 years, and that's perfect for him. We're in Costa Rica. He's working just outside that
Mhm.
door. He gets a steady paycheck. He gets to lead a team, and that's ideal for him. For me, I wanted something different. And so there's the remote worker path. And I think the third path would be like creating your own products and services,
Mhm.
less so to sell to a company, but more to sell to the world in a sense, right? So these can be courses, this can be e-commerce products, this can be ebooks, this can be your own writing that you're selling, this can be different products and different ways that you're selling them. But having some type of online business would be the third path.
Right. And I think a lot of the people that are listening are artists. They're in that third group. They're selling something. But I do know I talk to a lot of people that haven't fully made the jump. Like starting your own business is hard, making a full income off of that is hard. And I always remind people if you can work part time, remote, or do something, that's not always a bad thing. Like you said, your husband's remote, y'all are in Costa Rica, amazing, great. But
Those
also
are the
that
monkeys.
remote steady paycheck is not always a bad thing. And sometimes that gives you the flexibility to live the life you want, pursue the passions. If you do want to, be an artist or build your business, it might give you the space to do it. Because sometimes, starting at ground zero with no income coming in can be tough. And so I think, I'm glad you touched on that because I do think that's something a lot of people don't always mention. Like it's okay to work remote and still be corporate and you can still live the life you want.
100%. That's like the number one tip I give people is see if you can have one income source that's super flexible, that doesn't require a ton of your time, that also just isn't like a negative energy suck. Like if it's not going to be worth it, if the way to make this money just like drains you, you hate it, you're not going to have any of the good energy left for your business. But if you can have one income source, one revenue stream that like pays your bills, right? So that at least our rent's covered, our food is covered, some extras covered, whatever your bills are, have that, and then create your entrepreneurial idea. When
Mhm.
you try to put all of the pressure on your entrepreneurial idea to like literally pay for your lifestyle, I think that's one of the biggest red flags I've seen. And I quietly always have a couple clients that are paying all my bills. That's not necessarily what you see on my Instagram or on my website because those are more of my entrepreneurial products and things that I'm bringing to the market. But in the background, I've had one client for 4 years. They pay me the same amount every single month. I produce
Mhm.
their podcast. I have a little team going, and it's amazing. And I love that client, and I'm so happy. And they serve a purpose in my life. And it's easy, and we know each other well. And that allows me to play in all these other areas without putting pressure on them.
I think that's an amazing anecdote because I feel like so many people that I talk to are looking at Instagram, they're looking at what everyone else is doing, and they're like, well, they just get to play all day and they get to have fun and somehow they're paying all their bills. And it's like, no, a lot of the times, like there's something steady in the background. Like one, you don't know everyone's full story, but also build systems like that. Can you have some steady income source? Can you have something that allows you the flexibility? I mean, especially my listeners are all creatives, like they want to be creative, but I think the hardest part about building your own business is you also have to think about what's going to sell. And if you're stuck in this trap of like, well, I constantly have to be selling to pay all my bills, and you kind of disable that creativity sometimes. And so I think finding a way to have some passive income, have a consistent client or something where at least the bare minimum bills are going to get paid, it kind of opens up that freedom and fun and play, like you said.
I think it's huge. I It really makes or breaks the difference between entrepreneurs who are just going all in. I mean, of course, there's other cases, right? Maybe you've been saving for a decade, or maybe you have a lot of family support and financial support,
Mhm.
or maybe you have a lifestyle that doesn't cost that much to live, and you're just like, I'm going all in on this thing. I am so done. Sure, there's always going to be unique cases for everybody, but general advice, right? Have something consistent that pays your bills so that you can play in the other ways. And I think when you don't see people talking about that on social media, it's because it's kind of in conflict with so much of what we're learning about building a personal brand in social media right now, which is
Mhm.
have a clear core message, have a clear core niche. If you drown it out by having all these different things that you're talking about, then no one's going to understand what you do. And so if you're looking at people who seem like they're just playing with their passion all the time, they're probably just leveraging social media in an effective way, which is trying
Mhm.
to be known for one thing. That's not the whole picture of what they're doing in the background. Like I said, no, it's nowhere on my website, it's nowhere in my social media pages about this podcast boutique agency I own. I have it, I have the clients, I have the team, but it's not something I'm actively advertising because that's not my entrepreneurial endeavor that I'm trying to grow right now.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. This all sounds great, but let's get real. Obviously, there are challenges. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to pursue my path and freedom lifestyle. There it is. Can you touch on just maybe some challenges you faced as you were starting your freedom lifestyle journey, but also how do we deal with challenges? Because obviously, it's not just sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, I think a big challenge that I had, and I see a lot of people have when I work with them in like my coaching programs, or just even people reach out to me for advice, is having so many different ideas. And I absolutely had so many of these ideas too, especially if you're studying entrepreneurship, you're listening to amazing podcasts like this, you are going to be bombarded with like all different things you could be doing to like be creative, to be playing, to creating revenue sources, to bringing products to the market. And you could be thinking like, oh my gosh, I want to have courses, I want to have a podcast, I want to have a mastermind program, I need to have like social media, TikTok, LinkedIn strategy, I want to have a Facebook group, I want to like have a profile on Fiverr and sell my services there. There are so many different things you could be doing. And if you do an audit of what I'm doing, like I'm doing all of that. Like I have multiple revenue streams, some passive, some active, but the truth is like I basically did them one by one. And I think that is so important of just like focusing. And the cool part is like if you're paying your bills, you can choose whichever one you're most excited about to focus on right now.
Right.
Versus if you're not, then it's like, what is your quickest path to monetization? And let's start with that. So depends on where you're at financially is what I would say to focus on first. But like really, really focus and be like, in these next 90 days, I'm launching the podcast. I'm going to figure out the systems to do it. I'm going to batch a bunch of content. I'm going to figure out how it all works. I'm going to have the team in place. I'm going to get that weekly cadence going. And then once that's going, then maybe 90 days later, you're like, I'm going to create my first course. I'm
Mhm.
going to figure out where to sell it, what I'm going to talk about, record it all, market it, get it working, get all the tech going, launch it, have a big promotion for it, talk about it for a month. okay, well, now I have a podcast and I have an online course. And I think like that is the key, is to just focus on ideally one or two things at a time. And that's something I'm trying to help people do right now. Like my latest program is called Your Next 90 Days. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what we do. It's like come in with a goal or two in 90 days. Let's get it to be done. Let's celebrate it. We don't want to be hustling every quarter of the year, but let's focus on one thing at a time.
I love that, and I think that's actually something I'm working on in my own business right now. Like, okay, there's a I mean, always, there's so many ways to grow, there's so many things I wanna pursue, there's so many things I wanna do, and I'm really taking a step back and saying, "Okay, what is most important for me to change right now or improve or add, and can I focus on that literally for 90 days?" And I think that's such a great concept because I do feel like, one, as creatives, we have a ton of ideas, we wanna do a million things. As entrepreneurs, like, that's just the way
Like
we
double
are.
whammy. It's like creative and entrepreneurial. Like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's the brain never stops working. But then I think on top of that, we're also bombarded with that whole list. I mean, I was sweating as you were saying it. It's like there's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's Fiverr, there's YouTube, and I think people all of a sudden are like, well, I feel like I have to be everywhere because everyone else is everywhere. And it's also this concept of if I start one thing and it doesn't work right away, well, I'm just going to try all these other things. And it's like you really have to dive in and do the work and be present and put all that effort into one thing, set it up, and then you can move to the next, like you said. And it's understanding that working on one or two things is going to be so much more successful than spreading yourself thin, which I think people intuitively maybe know, but don't always actually act that way.
Yeah, I think like you touched on a good point of what happens when it doesn't work, when that's your only thing going on. And so there's a bit
Mhm.
of a paradox with that. But I'll share one note, which is I heard this concept before and I loved it, which is like you only get one thought in the shower. And ever since I heard of that, I really sit with that. I'm like, it's true. Like in those times where you're just like going for a bike ride or in the shower, like what is your monkey mind thinking about? And if you have like 10 different projects going on, you're not going to get that. And there's another term for it, but basically the concept of when you're like you just have these organic thoughts that come to you and you're making these connections happening because that's your sole focus right now. So like maybe my focus right now is booking speaking opportunities.
Mhm.
Well, if I was also trying to create a course and launch a podcast and create like a new revenue stream, well, who knows? It's going to be all scattered. But maybe I'm in the shower and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I just remembered my friend from 3 years ago who was working on that conference. Like, I wonder if she's still working there. I'm going to reach out to that person. And you just like benefit from just like ideas coming to you that you can take action on when that's the sole thing you're focusing on. So
Right.
that's another thing I would share. The idea of like what happens when it doesn't work though, like it is kind of nice to have one thing that is going well, right?
Mhm.
And like that's another thing is like I try not to take a huge risk without having something at the same time that I'm like doing that I'm good at. Because at least for me, then I have a lot of like self doubt creep in, and then like it affects my self esteem and it affects my identity. And those are normal things that can happen when you're putting yourself out there and it's like not going well at the very beginning. And you know, like you need to have time for it to have traction. And so, a way I like cushion that is like have some other projects that like I'm doing something I'm good at. I'm doing something that it's just like I know it's working. I'll know I'll be successful at that. When I do it, it's pleasant. It reminds me that I'm skilled and that I'm talented. And I just go, spend some energy on that when one thing's getting tough. And I do feel like that really helps.
I think that's a great way to put it because I think self-doubt is so, so, so common, especially with entrepreneurs, because it is hard and it is sometimes a long game. And so I think having something, whether it be, touching back on a remote job or, something that's a safety net, something you enjoy, something you know you're good at, and that is strong while you're doing something that's riskier. That's how I've built my whole business. It's like I take risk, I just start, I throw myself in, but always knowing like I can fall back on X, Y, and Z. And I think that makes taking the risk a lot easier and a lot more fun because you're like, okay, I can really throw myself into this because I know if I fall, I'm not going to, I'll be caught by something.
Totally. And also being in an environment, like your environment is so huge in terms of like what you think is normal and your resilience. Like if you surround yourself with other people who are taking risks and who are putting themselves out there and are going through the ebbs and flows that is the entrepreneurial journey, it helps you normalize it so much more. And it doesn't make you feel like you're like this weird unicorn amongst your group of people who all seem to be like living a much more easy in a way lifestyle because they're just like going through the motions and doing things, and then you feel like you've like created this hard life for yourself.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's a dynamic I've noticed in myself and other people versus, yeah, when I'm talking to people like you, I'm like, you get it. I could be talking to you right now about how I'm launching this webinar, and every day I'm like, oh my God, what if people don't come? Or like, it's free. What if no one signs up? And you'd be like, oh yeah, I totally get that. That's
Mhm.
so normal. And in 2 minutes, you'd be able to validate my feelings.
Right. And I think talking to other people that have gone through it, that are either they can understand or that are even maybe a couple steps ahead of you, is so beneficial for that reason, because they can validate your feelings. But I think it's also, at least in my experience, sometimes there's a mindset shift where they also remind me, but you get to do this and think about what could happen and like how great it's going to be. Whereas I think when you're in your own head, it's really easy to focus on the stress and the negative versus, wow, this is so exciting. I'm excited about it. And so I think surrounding yourself with other people that get it basically is a really good way to kind of help with that negative self-talk.
Totally. Yeah, I'm always investing in other coaches, other
Mhm.
programs, other communities. As a online worker and part-time digital nomad, I don't necessarily want to be in the big cities. Like when I lived in Toronto in Canada, I could go to a networking event every single night. Like there was a plethora of opportunities to connect with cool women like you, to be in entrepreneurial environments. Well, now I'm really into these like small Caribbean beach towns, or in Canada, I moved to Squamish, which is a small mountain town. And
Mhm.
so I have to like put in extra effort to have that be my reality. And yes, you could pay your way to these masterminds and to these programs, which is where I'm at in my business. But for someone listening, like it could just be as easy as creating who you follow on social media, creating which podcasts you listen to, like this, like just by having that be in your like consumption every single day, like even that helps so much.
Exactly. And I do think we're more connected now because of social media, or we can be more connected if we use it the right way. And I think what I found, at least in my sphere of artists, people generally want to talk to you. I mean, like, I think if you go in with a reasonable request and you reach out to someone, a lot of people are feeling the same way. So a lot of the times it's not as hard as we think it is to connect with other people. It's like just reach out.
Mhm. Totally. Voice notes, I'm a huge fan
Me too.
of Instagram voice notes. I feel like you can just, well, it's easier for me to talk than type personally.
Mhm.
Maybe you too, because you're a podcaster. But you can just like connect in such a more human way. And yeah, I've been a big fan of those.
I love that, and I think it's such a hearing someone's voice tells you so much more about who they are, what they're trying to say. I feel like I can read people's personalities more through their voices, so I love the voice note feature. Speaking of social media, Instagram, kind of marketing in general, I really want to talk about, and you touched on it earlier, self-promotion. So obviously, if we're gonna do something on our own, we have to get comfortable promoting ourselves. But I think that doesn't really come naturally to most people. So, first, why is that hard? What fears come up in us that makes self promotion so difficult?
Hmm. Yeah, there's definitely the fear of what are people going to think,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to social media, because maybe you have created social media accounts exclusively for this endeavor, which a lot of people do. I think it's a bit of a mistake to not also leverage your personal networks and to not also post about your business or what you're doing on your personal Facebook feed or your personal Instagram feed, because you just never know. And you just never know people from your past who might be a good fit for you or might know somebody who's a good fit for you. So, like, step one, that is like my belief is you should be leveraging your personal brand and you should be leveraging your personal accounts, not just hiding behind like your business logo or social media pages like that. So, if you are doing that, then you're going to have a lot of things that come up about, well, not everybody following me is my target ideal audience who is like opted into this content and who has agreed to see this like they have on my business account. And then you have a lot of things coming up. Well, what is that person from high school who I've been talking to in decades going to think about me? Or what is my family going to think if they see I'm doing this, sometimes depending on your environment. So a big one is, yeah, just like worrying what people think and worrying people are going to judge you. Another one is like worrying that your content isn't going to perform and that you're going to be embarrassed, that maybe you're going to show up live on Instagram or create a reel and no one's going to watch it or no one's going to show up. And you have that type of feeling. And like, those are real fears. You can take all of the social media courses or social media marketing programs and learn all the tactics. But if you can't move past that, like you'll never hit publish and you'll never actually show up and do the thing that you need to do.
Right. Exactly. How can we work to overcome this? Like if you are fearful, you're sharing on your own page, you're worried. I mean, I think that's a big one is worrying what my friends and family will think. I think that's very common. I think people are, if they do start a separate account, they're like, great, okay, I can talk to people I don't know all day long.
So
But, how do
tempting.
we get over that fear?
Well, first of all, you have to know, what is your fear? Like, name it. What is actually going on? And then like do that. Well, then what? And then what? And then what? And it's like that series where you like really get to the core of what you're scared of. And then you ultimately realize like, okay, it's actually not that big of a deal. And
Mhm.
so that's just like an exercise like my therapist always encourages me to do and help me move past some of these like worries that everybody is thinking certain things about me. So you could do that. And then you could also do it in the positive. Well, then what? Well, then what? Well, then what? If I do this and it does resonate and somebody who does want to buy from me or does know somebody or does like this content or does find it valuable, like you can also do, instead of like the doom, like actually thinking about all the positives, what could go right versus what could go wrong. I think those are just like helpful exercises for anybody to do. And I think like, just being honest, it doesn't go away. Any of like even the big entrepreneurs and people I follow who are so many steps ahead of me, they say like that fear still exists. Like the difference is you take action
Mhm.
despite the fear and you do it anyway. And I think like that is just a good reminder that it's like you're gonna have to navigate it anyway. Like don't think that it's gonna go away. It definitely gets easier the more you do something, the more just like natural it is and you don't like have so much crippling paralysis around it. But like when you're launching something new every single time, like there are thoughts that come up in my mind that I have to move past, and I have to remember in those moments like why I'm doing this. And having a strong why would be like my third tip of anchoring you, of like make it less about you and more about this like bigger vision you have, either to help people or to create a lifestyle for yourself so that you can show up as your best self, so that you can actually show up better for the world. Like you get to define that why. But I think that's like another helpful thing is like make it less about you and make it more about what this bigger vision for this business even means to you.
Right. And how do we build a brand on that? So, okay, we understand our why, we know who we are. How do we turn that into a brand? And then how do we share that brand with the world? Beyond there's social media, there's obviously a lot of ways, but kind of elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, well, I think your brand is, what do you want to be known for? And I think this is when you can get more tactical. And this is actually when taking some branding trainings or some Instagram freebies where you can go through some prompts and help you really clearly articulate it. I remember I did one with Boss Babe, Natalie Ellis,
Mhm.
before, and she got you to think about, okay, like, well, what are the 5 things you want to be known for? And you don't want them all to be related to your business, right? You want to have that healthy mix of people trust you, but they also like you and they relate to you and they want to work with you, but they also think you're credible. And so, you get to define what that brand is for you. But let's say tactically, okay, what are 5 things I want to be known for? And maybe 2 to 3 of them are related to my business, related to my niche, related to my services, related to my area of expertise. And the other one are like personal things. I'm a big fan of Taylor Swift. I think anybody who follows me on social media would know that. I have a Bengal cat who I'm obsessed with. I think anybody who follows me on social media will know that. And it does actually help me make relationships. The number of people who have messaged me when Taylor's album got announced that she's launching a new one on April 19th and being like, oh my gosh, you must be so excited. Like, that is what people end up associating me with. When there's a new viral cat toy that comes out, I'll have people tag me in posts being like, I think this is for Bagheera. Like, what do you think of this? And you really do become known for things. And I think your brand should be like a mix of your personal stuff and making you relatable so that people enjoy you and like you, want to work from you, but then also like having a core niche and a core area of expertise that people associate you with, because it's just going to be way easier for people to create opportunities for you that way.
Exactly. I think that's what people leave out is the personal stuff. They feel like that might dilute the brand or it might not fit, but that's really what's going to make people relate to you, want to work with you and want to reach out because there's a thread. There's a reason for them to reach out to you beyond just business. And I think that's how relationships really grow. And you touched on this earlier, but marketing, you need people to know, like, and trust you and you need to be credible. But I mean, for people to know specifically like and trust you, they need to have a connection with you. So it does need to be something like, oh, I love Taylor Swift too. That's an easy thing for me to talk to her about or to relate to her. Her content is going to resonate with me. Like, it's easier to make that connection. So I think that's a really good point to think about. What do you want to be known for beyond just, the obvious business things?
Mhm. And if you can take it one step further, like I heard this before, and I did this exercise where it's so much easier to create a relationship with somebody when you share why you do what you do versus
Mhm.
what you do. And so, like for me, like what I do is help freedom seekers leverage flexible work to design their life, right? That is what I do. And I've thought about that statement a lot, and I'm
Right.
happy with the copywriting. But why do I do it? If I said to you, like, yeah, I'm Sam, and I just believe that work should support your ideal lifestyle. And I believe that we only have one shot at life, and I want to seize it to its fullest. And I want work to come secondary and support that. Like, if I start using language like that, it's going to be much quicker for people to be like, I believe that too. Yeah. Like, oh my God, life is so special. Life is a gift. Like, yes, hello. And so I also think tactically, if you can try to have like beliefs and why you do in your messaging, that's also going to help both the trust and the like factor.
Definitely. There's that video Start With Why. It reminds me of that, like getting back to
Hmm.
the heart of the business and
Hmm.
why exactly why you're doing it.
Hmm.
It's a good video. People should check it out. But I
Yeah.
think that's great advice. I kind of want to get tactical for a little bit and talk about, we've touched on brand, we've talked on marketing, but let's talk about content. So like when we're actually making this content, I kind of want to get strategic. So we know what we should talk about, our why, who we are, our pillars of interest. How can we repurpose content to be more strategic? I think that's something a lot of people struggle with is they're like, okay, great. I know what to talk about, but maybe I don't have a million pictures or I'm not always coming up with something new. How can we be strategic with our content and the use of it?
Hmm. Well, first of all, video is what's performing on pretty much all platform right now. So if you feel like you don't have pretty pictures, I don't even think we really need them as much
Mhm.
whenever I post a static image, unless it's like really cool and I'm in some exotic location, it's not going to get as much engagement as if I created a video. And so that's just my first comment in terms of tactics and where the trends are. I would say that like my favorite thing to teach people how to do is to create content around like the things that you want to be known for, but also having that like factor. Having any type of long form content is going to allow you to do that. Like there's wild stats with podcasting that someone who starts a podcast, like 70% of people actually finish the entire episode, which if your episodes are like 30, 40 minutes, think about how much time you have of somebody's attention and their focused attention. That's going to give you so much chance to not only position yourself as an expert, but also like get them to know the nuances behind you versus like a copywriting or a blog post or an email where every single word you need to keep hooking them in. I find that is so much harder than showing up on a podcast and bringing my energy and sharing
Mhm.
that long form content. And so like of course you could create your own podcast and you could um use AI tools to repurpose it, which we can talk about. But again, that isn't even for everybody. So I would take it even one step further, which is like be a guest on other people's podcasts. Because one thing we always do is have conversations. So if I was like, hey, go create a video where you talk about your expertise, you answer some frequently asked questions, you like pitch about your services, that's like really hard for people to do of like, oh my God, okay, get in front of the camera. I have to say
Right.
this. They feel like they need a script. It's so natural. But if I just like asked you what you do and we're in a conversation, oh my gosh, it's so much easier because it's what we do every day. And so like my favorite hack is use a website like matchmaker.fm, which is similar to how we met, but it's a platform that connects people who have podcasts with people who want to be on podcasts, pitch people to be on their show, get on people's podcasts, and then take that long form content. So after they've spent an hour interviewing you, asking you the questions, you leave it, you're like, oh my God, that was gold. That was so easy. I have so much to say, or I love sharing that story. Great. Ask for that full video and then use AI tools to create small snippets from that interview that you can then repurpose on social media, YouTube, clips for your website, things like that. And I think like anybody can do that, no matter like how scared you are at showing up online, how much time you have to create your own podcast. Everyone has time to do that, especially because those are like great hacks to getting there quickly.
I think that's great. And I think it's one, I love that you gave an actual example of the matchmaker so that people can go do this today. But it's also, there's so many podcasts out there. I think people have a fear of, oh, well, how would I get on a podcast? It's you have unique expertise. There's something you can talk about. You have to pitch yourself, but there are probably a lot of podcasts out there that would love to have you as a guest. So it's also build your confidence because there are opportunities. And like you said, it's not that hard.
100%. And I mean, there's some tips for that. So definitely if you're just gonna like cold email pitch someone in their inbox, like know that you're probably gonna have to email a number of people. My rule is like 10 people. So like get 10 email addresses, 10 shows, pitch them all on the same day. That way, just by like rules of probability, you'll have someone respond and you will forget about the people who never did. Because like I said, I have probably 2 people pitch me a week. And I prefer to find podcast guests myself. So it doesn't matter how amazing your story is, I'm not really open to being pitched. And that's going to be the case for a lot of people. Not everybody. So when you do pitch, it's really helpful to give a bullet list of things you could talk about. Make it really easy for the guests. Like,
Mhm.
here's some themes we could have in this episode, or here's some questions you could ask me. When someone does that, I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds like an interesting episode. I would want to listen to that. Let's create it. So, one, if you're going to do cold outreach, make sure you do like 10 people at a time and make it really easy for them. I think a better way is to either use like a site like Matchmaker, because these are people who want to be pitched and are looking for guests,
Mhm.
or even like sites like Podcorn, where you can pay to be a guest on people's shows. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. Like different podcasters will have different rates, and you can sometimes like maybe pay whatever amount that is to be on someone's podcast. And remember, we're also getting that full video that we could then repurpose. And so if you think about it creatively, you can get a lot more value out of that. But those are like much quicker ways to getting to that end outcome, which is I just want content that I can repurpose on social media. But if you do want to do cold pitching, that's my advice.
Yes, I think that's great advice. Can we talk about the back end? So you get on a podcast, you have the video, fantastic. What tools can we use? Because I think video editing probably intimidates a lot of people listening. What are some AI tools people can use right now to make all of this easier, to actually get it from, Zoom call, video to the format that you need for a reel or TikTok or whatever?
Totally. And I will give you my referral link because I think it gives everybody a discount on their
Perfect.
first month. But my favorite one, have you heard of video.ai?
Yes, I use
Okay.
it.
Okay. I think that one is so good. Like I've played with a lot of different AI tools.
Mhm.
Like for example, I noticed we're recording on Zoom. I record my podcast on Riverside. Riverside now has AI tools built in them where it can do exactly what we're talking about. And you can also upload a file. So it doesn't have to be your own podcast you recorded. You can upload someone else's content that they created. And I think it's pretty good. I think video.ai is the best one I've seen. Basically, it goes from long to short. So you upload the full hour long content, and within a couple of minutes, the AI will find different sections of the conversation that it sounds like, there's a theme around that. You give a piece of value, you say something interesting. They'll go so far of like creating a title for the video, pulling the captioning on it, and then you can have it automatically sized for whatever platform in one click. So maybe you want portrait for Instagram, maybe you want landscape for YouTube, maybe you want a square for LinkedIn or Facebook. You can do that. And then, of course, you want your branding on it. So, do we want to put certain color codes? I know the creatives on this team are like, well, it better look good. Perfect. You can have it fit your branding. You can upload logos. You can have it save different color codes, certain fonts you want to use, upload certain fonts. So I think like that's very accessible for many people. And then, if you're more techie, there's like more tools where you can get more granular with editing, but anyone should be able to do that.
I know, I love that because I feel like I have just started using video AI, and I also have started using Riverside for something else, and I'm going to integrate it soon. But it's anything that makes it easier. I mean, even for me, it was going from just doing audio podcasts to I have the video, let's just put it on YouTube too. It's like sometimes it's just not reinventing the wheel. It's you have the content. How can you use it in a lot of different ways? And, I talk to artists all the time. I'm like, you are in your studio. It's probably aesthetic, you're an artist, like there's probably paints, like just video all day. And then you can use that and you can use AI tools to get, interesting clips and stuff like that. But podcasting is a great example, but I think also just having video of the stuff you're doing is really interesting to people. And there's so
Hmm.
many AI tools out there that make it really easy to edit it.
Absolutely. I'm also a big fan of outsourcing. And so I
Mhm.
can also give you this link if you want. But I have this person on Fiverr, this amazing woman who I'll just send her a folder of just like a bunch of random videos that I've created. Like I said, like maybe I'm doing something, I'm recording a podcast. Well, just put my phone there and just have it recording as I'm doing something. Or maybe I'm making a plan for my week. Okay, like record me doing that thing. Again, artists, your videos are going to be so much cooler than what I can come up with, but you just like capture yourself doing things. Maybe I'm at an event and I want to do a recap. The problem is I'll have so many videos on my phone and I'm like, oh, this would be such a cool reel, but I don't even know where to start. This would take me
Mhm.
forever. She's for like literally like $7 US. I send her just a folder of unorganized videos, and within 2 business days, she'll give me a 30-second reel, trending audio, captions on it, looks great. I can have a revision if I want. Perfect, amazing. I just post that on my Instagram. And I've done that a couple times. And I'm like, wow, that literally would have taken me all day to do. And it probably still wouldn't have looked as good. So there's also outsourcing, which can be pretty affordable.
Yeah, and I think there's so many easy ways to find people like Fiverr and Upwork and all those websites. It's not hard to find people that also it probably takes them 5 minutes where it would take me hours
Literally,
probably. So it's just thinking about what your
literally.
time's worth too. It's like understanding the value of you. And I don't need to be the person on my computer trying to edit all these little reels that are going to take me way too long to do.
Unless you love it. And if it's a
Yeah.
creative process, then great. Or if you're super picky, like my podcast, I still outsource to an engineer to make it sound better, but
Mhm.
I'm still analyzing every word. Like I'm super picky about my own show. And that's just me. I haven't been able to outsource that. There's nothing that goes on the internet without me listening to it detailed. I'm always deleting stuff, moving things around, and I enjoy that, and that's important. There's other areas of my business that I'm not as attached to, and so those are easy ones to free up time and to outsource.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to round out. This has all been so helpful. I think really, really great pieces of advice, but I kind of want to pick your brain again to come back to that term. What have been your top takeaways from all the interviews that you have done? Obviously, you've talked to a lot of different people, lots of different lifestyles for lots of different reasons. Like, what have been some of the really big takeaways for you?
Hmm. I've been asked this question before, so I had an answer ready to go, which I'll just share and then I'll see if anything deeper comes. But a big thing that I've noticed in a theme is a lot of people end up being pushed into this lifestyle and pushed into taking the plunge. So it's a common thread is stories of people who were in an environment or in a situation they knew wasn't working for them.
Mhm.
And they wanted to make a change, but like never fully made a change. And then something like big and drastic either happened in their life where they got laid off or something changed at the company or they had to make a big move, or the
Mhm.
example of like the mom having her first baby, like basically a tipping point happened and then they had no other choice but to figure it out. And what I've learned from that is I realized that when you have no other choice, you realize how capable you actually are.
Mhm.
And that goes a little bit against the idea of like, okay, we'll have something cushy to pay your bills because then you can play. I think there is like a healthy mix of those two things that when you have no other option than to make it work, you realize how capable you've always been. And that was my story too. Like,
Mhm.
I wish I could say I finally was like fed up with the 40-hour work week and, gave my boss the finger and walked out and never returned. The truth is I was in a long distance relationship and I wasn't able to make this relationship work with my current job. Long story short, tried to move to the United States, tried to get a visa, found a new company, loved the new company, signed the offer, quit my job. 2 weeks after signing the offer, the company looked into it and was like, oh, we can't get you a visa. Oops, and pulled the offer. I'd already quit my job. It was like so traumatic. My work had planned a going away, moving away party. I attended it. I didn't even tell everybody. I was so embarrassed and so like, oh my God, I just made such a big mistake. What am I doing?
Mhm.
And like for me, that was ultimately the moment where I was like, I got to figure this out. Like, how am I going to be able to work in San Francisco? I can't get a visa there. And I just like started freelancing, started reaching out to my own network, thought it would be temporary. And I just, the whole time that was available to me. The whole time I had a network of people in my life who respected me, who wanted to work with me, who could create opportunities for me, who could allow me to work from anywhere. And I just like needed to be forced into it. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's a common story of people who I've had on my show. So take
That's
from that what you need.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I feel like I've heard stories like that too, and it is like you're being forced into it, or would you ever have really taken the risk? But it's
Hmm.
I don't know. It's an interesting thought because it's like I don't know if we can force things like that to happen, or do we want to wish things like that to happen? But
Oh
maybe it's
yeah, it was so
positive
traumatic.
of yeah, you're seeing the positive of something that was really negative. Like look how it affected your life.
Yeah, and it's like, do we all have to go through that? I don't know. I think like depending how spiritual you are, there's, a level of this where it's like the universe can just kind of push you into the life that is meant for you once you start like putting that out there and start like
Right.
putting those vibes out there. I had been wanting this and thinking about being an entrepreneur, but just didn't have an idea for a long time. And so I think that's also something to think about is what do you want your story to be? And like, can you experiment with that learning if you're more capable than you realize without having to be like pushed into trauma, which a lot of my guests on my show seem to have had.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't know. I feel like the more that you're talking about it, the more I'm thinking of stories where that's happened for a lot of people I know. But interesting concept. So that's definitely a cool takeaway.
Hmm.
I want to also kind of conclude with, and it could be something you've already said, but an overarching lesson or tip or something that you can offer the audience, like something you've learned through running your business, through jumping into this type of life. What is a piece of advice or something you've learned that you could pass on to my listeners?
I used to think that it was about learning the skill and making the plan and taking the action and that everything would work out. And I think that that does work to some extent, but you're always going to reach a new upper limit. Like the mindset work and the work that you can do to like really know that you're worthy of the life that you want to be living and really know that you have what it takes and you have the skills and you are talented, like investing in whatever that looks like for you is going to have compounding effects throughout your entire career. Like you're going to just continue to hit upper limits that you just feel stuck on because you don't actually feel like you're capable of that next level. Um, and that is something I see in my clients. That is something I've seen in myself. And it's just so much harder to invest in that stuff because it's not linear. But if you can find like a really great coach or read some really great books with some journal prompts and some actionable advice for you to take, like that is going to be such a good investment in yourself because your confidence to do things and to take these risks and to withstand the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship, like that is what you need. I've seen so many people quit when it gets hard. I've seen so
Mhm.
many people give up and go back to their safety net when they hit a roadblock. And the people who like stay in it are the people who continue to have success and to continue to level up.
Yeah, and
And
I
that's
think
an inside job.
it takes time, and I think that's the hardest part is as your business starts to grow and your time obviously can decrease depending on what you're doing, it's still making the time for the self work, for the mindset work, for thinking about growth, thinking about how to deal with challenges. Like I know I fell into a trap for a while where I was so caught up in my business, I wasn't working on the bigger picture of my business. I was just like running through the day to day. And I wasn't getting where I wanted to go, and it was for exactly that reason. Like you really have to build in time to focus on yourself too.
100%. Like I've had again like forced breaks
Mhm.
in my business COVID was a huge one for me. I felt like I couldn't be talking about the freedom lifestyle and all my things that I was promoting when everyone was saying stay home. And I had a couple clients that got scared and ended their contracts. And that was like such a huge period of growth for me because I was forced into taking less action, going like creating less episodes, doing less work. And I was able to like really think about what is my next level, what is the bigger picture. My income grew so much when I like got back into the swing of things. And now like I intentionally take these breaks and periods when I feel like, okay, like I need another level up. And like just creating that space to just like realign, invest in myself, make some bigger moves, change things up, like stop doing the same thing and like see where that takes. And that always brings me to the next level. And I'm in one of those periods right now.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so interesting. And I think that's a fear for a lot of people. They get into that period and they're like, "Oh no," but it's actually, can you use this to your advantage? Like, force breaks, or if a break comes, like, how can we use this for growth? I think I've had so many in my business. I can think back. COVID was one for me too, and it ended up exponentially growing my business. But it's scary, and you're having this moment of, okay, I gotta figure this out. But I think it's in that calm you can really, again, it's like coming back to the shower idea. Like, you have the one thought and you're like, what am I gonna do with it? How am I gonna grow? How am I gonna make this better? So I really love that.
And before you know it, I bet you were busy again, wishing you were in that state where you had less work to do and less things going on. And before you know it, you're going to be in that state of like, oh, I'm like in my business again, not like growing my business. So when you have those periods where you're actually getting to think strategically, that is a gift. But you're exactly right. Like if you try to rush yourself out of it, if it's too uncomfortable for you to have uncertainty, and you just like jump at the next opportunity to be busy again and to like not having to have those awkward thoughts of like, what do I want? How am I going to do this? Oh, then you're going to miss out on that. And like that is a big part of it. Like it is uncomfortable. It really is uncomfortable. Like it sucks. But on the other end of it, every single time is like a way more aligned life. And like for me, I call level up, meaning like closer and closer to just more authentic version of how I want to be living and my ideal lifestyle. And I'm always in pursuit of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's your brand and that's what you're doing. So I think that's great. To kind of conclude, can you tell everyone just how to find you, how to learn about you, how to buy from you, all of your all of your different, I guess, accounts, and where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to welcome anyone to come check out my podcast. It's called The
Mhm.
Freedom Lifestyle. So we talked a little bit about that. But if you want to explore different ways to work with me or learn more about different like offers I have, you can go to my website, whatsyourfree.com. I'm hosting a webinar right now called Your Best Self. So if you literally go to whatsyourfree.com/your best self, you can learn a little bit more about that. But that's really going to touch on some of the work that we talked about today, where it's one thing to talk about and think about like what you want to do this year and what you want to make happen. But it's a whole other thing to think about like who do you need to be to get there. And so that's a free workshop I'm running. I have the Your Next 90 Days program where we can work together. You come in with 1 to 2 goals, and in 90 days, we really take action on making that a reality. You celebrate. The last thing I want is for you to start another 90-day sprint after that, because you don't always want to be in sprint mode. We want to also have our businesses create the joy and the life we want, or like, what's the point? So I'd say those are the key things.
That's great. Well, I will link all of those so that everyone can easily access you and listen to you and learn about your different all of your different offers. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to me. This was amazing. This was great.
Thank you. You're such a great interviewer, Haley. So I love being on your show.